PDF looks a lot bigger than I thought it would be when I was doing the TBR. I think I'm gonna have to start taking page count into account because holy crap, there's a lot of pages here.
Hey guys, it's Kesara, and today I'm gonna be doing my November TBR. So the closer we get to the end of the year, the busier and busier my life gets. So I like to leave the end of the year for my comfort zone. So in December, I generally stick to rereads of my favorites, or just rereads in general. It doesn't have to be of my favorites. But in November, I like to read high fantasy. And I feel like this year, I honestly haven't read as much fantasy as I wanted to. Like, I read a lot, but when it came to fantasy, I felt like I tended to pick up other things instead, or I would pick up like contemporary fantasy or historical fantasy, and that counts towards fantasy, but I didn't necessarily get adult high fantasy. So that's basically what this month is going to be dedicated to. Specifically high fantasy. I do have one YA book in there, so I will be getting to that as well. But I am like the most excited for a TBR that I've been all year, except for maybe July because that was also a fantasy month. But this one in particular is just going to be books that are 100% in my comfort zone, and you know what? I'm okay with that, and I'm really excited for it. We can wait until January for the rest of those books that are probably harder for me to read. So I have got a fantastic TBR, and I honestly could not decide at all of what I wanted to put on this TBR because I have just lists and lists of books that I want to read. So it was incredibly difficult for me to decide which books to put on this TBR, but I finally narrowed it down. I had so many new releases that I wanted to read, as well as backlisted books that are new series that I want to read, as well as I need to continue on with the series that I'm already in the middle of. So I have a lot of sequels. So I tried to make it somewhat balanced between the three of those, but we'll see what happens. But like always, I'll start out with my monthly goals, which is to read one classic and one reread per month. So we're gonna start this all out with my classic for the month. So I'm planning on reading The Once and Future King by T.H. White. I've heard really great things about this classic. It's a King Arthur retelling, and I honestly don't actually know the story of King Arthur. So I definitely feel like this could be an interesting read. I've heard really great things about this. Still had this on my shelf for a really long time and kind of need to get to it. Hopefully I'll end up liking it. I know a lot of people they don't want to read more European inspired or King Arthur inspired fantasies, but I honestly haven't read that many because I tend to go more to the high fantasy route. So I feel like this could be an interesting read for me as well. For my reread this month, I'm going to be rereading The Lies of Locke Lamora by Scott Lynch. So this book I started for the first time way back almost a decade ago. Not a whole decade ago. I'm thinking 7 or 8 years ago. I put it down. Even though I knew that I liked it, I was in a reading slump and I put it down. And then I picked it up again last year for the first time in 8 years, and I read it, and oh my gosh, this book is so good. I absolutely love this, but I didn't realize how subtle the author's writing is when I was going into it, so I didn't read it as carefully as I should have. Now knowing how subtle and intricate and how detailed this author writes, I actually really want to reread it before continuing on with the other books in the series, and because of that, I haven't continued on with the other books in the series, and I really need to. I'm definitely due for this reread. It's been almost a year since I read this for the first time, and I absolutely loved it, and I need to reread it. I meant to reread it that month and just didn't get around to it, and then I got distracted by other things, but I'm so ready to reread this book. For those of you guys who don't know, this is the first novel in the Gentleman Bastard series. It's following a character named Locke Lamora, who at the beginning of the novel is kind of an orphan, and he's a thief, and he becomes the leader of the thieving group called the Gentleman Bastards, and he is just outrageous. He is a character. It has some of the best friendships in this book. It switches between the past and present, or the future, however you want to think of it. Throughout this book, it's structured in a really interesting way that just works really well for this book. And like I said, super detailed, and I'm really excited to go back and reread this book. So I wanted to put all of my most anticipated releases for November into this TBR, except that they're all coming out in the last 2 weeks of November, which means I'm only gonna have a week and a half to read them. So I can't put all 4 of them on this list, and one of them I definitely don't think I'm gonna get to at least until December. So I ended up only putting one of those new releases on this list, which makes me sad, but at the same time, I'm still gonna get to the other ones before the end of the year. It's just probably not gonna be finished before the end of November, but the one I definitely want to finish before the end of November is The Burning God by R.F. Kuang. I'm so excited for this, you guys. You have no idea. The Poppy War series is a series that I started reading when it first came out. I didn't expect very much from it because it was just super hyped on BookTube, but holy crap, this is such a great grimdark fantasy series. I love grimdark fantasy, which is not as popular on BookTube as I want it to be, but it's still a really popular genre. And the Poppy War and the Dragon Republic, which are the first 2 books in the series, just absolutely blew my mind. I love them so much. If you guys have not read this series, you need to read it. It's absolutely fantastic. I can't wait for The Burning God, which is the finale. It's an Asian-inspired grimdark fantasy series that is based based off of Chinese history, which is just absolutely fantastic. I love it. The first book in the series kind of lulls you into like a false sense of security. It's thinking that you're kind of in like a magic school or boarding school sort of setting, and then out of nowhere it becomes like an all-out war, and it's fantastic. I loved every second of the series. I absolutely love the main character, Rin. She is relentless with herself and everyone around her, and I absolutely love it, and I can't wait to see what's gonna happen in the finale. So now I want to start with the sequels that I want to read in the month of November. I have a lot of high fantasy series that I'm in the middle of. It was really hard for me to narrow this down because there is a lot of them that I really want to continue on with, but I did have to narrow it down somehow, and these are the books that ended up rising to the top of the sequels that I want to get to right away. The first one is an absolute must for me, and that's Oathbringer by Brandon Sanderson. Yes, guys, I still have not read Oathbringer. I know, I finished Words of Radiance in April, but I haven't picked up Oathbringer yet. Rhythm of War is coming out in November, so I need to read Oathbringer in November, preferably as soon as possible. So I will be starting this very soon, and I'm really excited for it, and it's super long, so it's gonna take me a really long time to read, but it's okay. I'm really excited for this. Oathbringer is the third book in the Stormlight Archives. For those of you who don't know, I don't know how you would at this point not know that, but I'm really excited for it. Words of Radiance was fantastic. I absolutely loved it. Second book in this series, and I can't wait to get to Oathbringer and see what happens. I'm super excited for this. I can't wait to just get lost in this story, and hopefully I'll even start Rhythm of War before the end of the month because I've already pre-ordered it, so I probably need to start it if I'm paying for the full hardcover book. I'm really excited for this. The next sequel that I absolutely have to get to in the month of November is The Obelisk Gate by N.K. Jemisin. This is the second book in the Broken Earth trilogy. I reread the 5th season quite recently. By quite recently, I mean in July, so it's been a little while. The reason I reread it so it would be fresh in my mind when I continued on with The Obelisk Gate, and then I didn't continue on with Obelisk Gate. So it's time for me to get to The Obelisk Gate. Hopefully I can finish this quickly and get to the Stone Sky before the end of the year, but we'll see. I mean, I still have 2 whole months left, but I generally don't read a lot of new stuff in December. That might change this year, we'll see, but I'm really excited for this because the end of the 5th season does make me really want to continue on with the next book. Actually, I think I did at first continue on with The Obelisk Gate when I first finished the 5th season. I got into kind of a reading slump and I decided to just put it to the side, and now it's time for me to get back to it. The next book I want to talk about is Paladin of Souls by Lois McMaster Bujold. This is the sequel to The Curse of Chalian. It is book 2 of the World of Five Gods series, but from what I understand, the series are basically like a series of standalones. They're all set in the same world, but they're following different characters. So this book is following one of the side characters from the first book in the series, which I read The Curse of Chalian this year. It was one of my poll books, so you guys voted for me to read it, and I read it, and I absolutely loved it. I loved how in that first book, Bujold's writing was just so subtle in interesting ways that I really liked, and it just kind of creeps up on you. And then you get to the end, it's just like, wow, this book was really good without even realizing it. So I'm hoping Paladin of Souls is also really good. I haven't actually heard anyone talk about this, so if you've read this, let me know because I would love to hear what you thought of it. But I'm really excited for this. I really want to read more books by Lois McMaster Bujold, and I've heard that she has a great sci-fi series that I do plan on getting to as well, but I wanted to finish the other books in the World of Five Gods first. Paladin of Souls is definitely the next one that I need to get to. So the next one I kind of put as on a whim. It's because I'm currently reading the first book in the series and I'm loving it so much, I kind of just want to continue on with it, and that's Rise of Empire by Michael J. Sullivan, which is volume 2 of the Rhaeria Revelations. I'm currently in the middle of volume 1, which each volume of the series has 2 books, so there's a total of 6 books and 3 volumes. I've read the first book, really liked the first book a lot more than I was expecting to, and I'm currently on the second book, so I'm going to finish volume 1 very soon, and I feel like this is one of those series that I can kind of just continue reading, so I want to get to volume 2 in the month of November, and I'm really excited for it. I love the characters here, I absolutely love the world building here, and the writing just pulls me into the story in a way I wasn't expecting it to. I'm really enjoying this. It's kind of subtle because the plot is not like in your face amazing, but at the same time, it's still really good and really enjoyable, and I'm really excited to continue on with it. If I finish this early in the month, I might even continue on with volume 3. So now we're going to talk about some first books in series that I'm going to try and get to in the month of November. The first one is probably the one that has been on my TBR the longest, and that's An Ember in the Ashes by Sabaa Tahir. I put this on my TBR like way back in college. Like I wanted to read this way back then, and I actually had an ebook of it. Like I bought the ebook for $2.99 and I just never picked it up. And the audiobook is almost always available at my library for me to borrow, but like I never pick it up. So that's why this year I decided to buy a physical copy of it so that I would finish it before the end of the year. So I absolutely need to read this book. I don't know very much about it other than it's a YA fantasy, and I think it's like Middle Eastern inspired which is, it's just really cool. And the fourth book in this series is actually coming out this year. I've heard really great things about the series overall when it comes to YA fantasy, so it makes me really want to at least give it a try, and who knows, maybe I'll read more books in this series, and maybe I'll even get to the one that's coming out in December. Maybe I won't, I don't know, but I'm hoping that I'm gonna end up loving this. And the next book that I want to talk about is The Rune of Kings by Jen Lyons. I'm super excited for this, guys. I've actually already read the first chapter of this book, and I got super into it. It's been a good like 3 or 4 months since I've read that first chapter, but it made me really excited for this book, because previously most people that I've heard that have read this book are just kind of like, it's kind of good, it's okay, but like that first chapter was just like really intriguing for me, and I got really drawn into the story, so I'm really excited for this. Like, I've been meaning to read this book ever since then, and hopefully I'll end up loving this. It's a deeply political high fantasy novel, and honestly, what else could I possibly want from a book like this? So I'm really excited to get to this one as well. And before we get to my fantasy book series challenge, the last book that I want to try and get to in the month of November is Child of a Mad God by R.A. Salvatore. R.A. Salvatore is an author that I've been meaning to try for the longest time. Recently this year, I've heard a lot of people talking about Child of a Mad God, and I have it, so I ended up picking up this book, and that was like really early on in the year. I read a lot of high fantasy, and I still try and read a variety of other things, so in order to read other things, I can't read as much high fantasy as I want to. But since it's my high fantasy month, I think it's time for me to finally get to this. Hopefully I like R.A. Salvatore as an author, because I own like 4 other books by him, so hopefully I like him as an author, and hopefully I like this book. I've heard really great things about it. I heard that it's like a really fast-paced book and is like a binge-worthy series, so I'm really excited for that, and hopefully I'll end up loving this. So now it's time for my favorite part of all of these videos, even though the rest of this video was actually really good too, because it's like all fantasy books. My usual favorite part of this video, my fantasy book series challenge, and it's somewhat of a bittersweet one, because it'll be my last draw for my fantasy book series challenge, because in the month of December I always dedicate it to rereads. So for November I have 3 left in here, and I get to choose 2. So there's gonna be one that I'm not gonna get to this year. I'll get to it next year. There's actually quite a few that I haven't gotten to this year yet. It's actually gonna be more than just one that gets rolled over till next year, but there's gonna be one series that I wouldn't have even have tried to read, which makes me sad, but I get to choose 2, so hopefully the ones I choose are really good. So we have The Prince of Nothing by R. Scott Barker. So the first book in that series is The Darkness That Comes Before. I've heard really good things about this. Ever since I mentioned this on my channel for the first time, I've been hearing a lot of really good things about this. I've never read anything by this author before, but from what I understand, this is grimdark fantasy, and I love a good grimdark fantasy novel, so I'm hoping that I'm really gonna like this one. I'm actually really excited for this one. I've been hoping to get this one for a while now, and of course it's in the last month, but that's okay. It's gonna be a great month overall, so I'm really excited for this. We got one more. This one, ooh, it's kind of crooked. Which is the Divine Cities trilogy by Robert Jackson Bennett. So the first book in that series is A City of Stairs, obviously by Robert Jackson Bennett. I'm really excited for this. I've read 2 books by Robert Jackson Bennett before, Countryside and Shorefall. I liked both of them. Shorefall, it's a bit of a disappointment, but still a really good book. Like, still a really good book. And Foundryside, absolutely brilliant. So I'm excited to see what Robert Jackson Bennett does with this. I have no idea what this book is about. Like, no idea. It looks, honestly, it looks like an angel urban fantasy. Like, not my thing. I hope that's not what it's about. Oh, it's about gods that conquer the world. Okay, so not that. But I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what it's about. I think Robert Jackson Bennett's a fantastic author, so I'm hoping that I'm gonna really like this. So that's all I have for you guys. If you've read any of these books, let me know down in the comments, because I'd love to discuss it with you guys. I post videos on Sundays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, so consider subscribing. And if you'd like to be notified as soon as I upload, you can click that little bell icon. If you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up to support my channel. All social media links are in the description down below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.